In this guide, we're going to walk through a very cool feature available from your browser that you may or may not have known about. So, as you know, HTML and CSS code is actually always available in the browser. Our browsers interpret it, and that's how we have websites that look just like this one, like the DevCamp website. Now, there's some ways that we can, when we're debugging or we're wanting to learn how a feature was built, there's ways that we can do that. One is we can right-click on the page and click on View Page Source. Now, if we do this, we can see all of the code. So this is all of the HTML code associated with the DevCamp homepage. Now, if we were to go to a different page, then this would all change. This is simply what is generated from the HTML on the specific page. This is helpful. It's nice to see, what this looks like. So all of that code, if you take that plus the CSS, you could mimic the site. And so that's a neat way of doing it. However, that's not really the most helpful when it comes to debugging your own programs. And that is where the developer tools come in. So I'm going to right click on this Explore button, and I'm going to come down and click Inspect. Now, if you're using a different browser, like you're using Firefox or Safari, every browser has this, every modern browser has this kind of tool. And so I definitely recommend exploring where yours is, but usually it's going to be some spot in the when you right click. So when I do that, you can see it brings up this inspector panel. Now, this may look a little bit scary if you've never used it before, but it's really a powerful tool, and I'll show you how we can use this. And you can follow along. You can go even the DevCamp website or your favorite website and play around with it. But if you see right here, this right here allows you to select an element. So we can select anything on the page. So I can select this one button, or I could select the entire page. And also notice down here on the left-hand side, this shows exactly what we're selecting. But in this case, I want to select that button. And let me come back. There we go. So this button is now selected, and if we come here on the right-hand side, and I'll make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see, you can see all of the styles associated with this. Now, I know we haven't dug into CSS quite yet. However, this is a helpful thing before we get into it so that you can know how you can go and debug your own CSS code and your HTML code and things like that. So let's say what we want to do right here. This color for Explore. Right here we can see that it's black, but what would happen if I wanted to change it to blue? I could change it to blue, and you can see that it changes right here. Now, a very important thing to know if you've never used this before, this doesn't change the website for everybody else. This only changes it for you and you in this one session. So if I come up here and hit refresh, you'll see that it goes back to normal because all this code is stored on the server. However, when we use tools like Google's web developer tools, we can then come here and change them. So I'm going to click on the logo right here, and you can see a number of different elements. Over here we saw how we could change things with the styles. But what happens if I want to change the actual HTML? I can come here, double click on this, and say we want to see what would this logo look like if it was 600 pixels wide. If I change that and hit enter, you can see that it extends the width of the logo and brings it up. Now let's scroll down just to kind of keep on playing with it a little bit. Each one of these little blocks or columns, notice how they're nested inside each other. So these are all in divs. So as I select something, as I hover over something, on the bottom left-hand side, it shows me the exact piece of code that I'm selecting. So here, I'm grabbing the div that all of these items live inside. And then I could come and see what does this paragraph tag look like, and then what's it nested inside of. And you can see all the different elements associated with it. So if I click on this, you can see then it's selected, and I could come over here and I could change anything I want. Not only could I edit items, but I could also add items. So if I click on that And let's say that I want to change the color for this paragraph to be green. You can see that it changes all of it. And you may wonder, why did it change all of it when we just selected this one item? And it's because of this CSS selector, and we will get into that, but for right now, just to give you a little bit of preview of what that means, it means that we selected not just this one element, but we actually selected all of the elements on the page with that paragraph tag. Now I'm going to come here, change this back to white because that's ugly, and now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to come back and I'm going to select this paragraph tag again, because what happens if we do want to play around with the styles for a certain section? Well, what we can do is at the very top we have this element style. So with this element style, now I can hit color, and now I can do green, and notice how it only changes this one paragraph. And so what this is helpful for is, say that you want to see, okay, what does this one element on a page, what would it look like if I would change the color or the background color or the width or the height or something like that. With developer tools, you're able to really get granular, and then what you can do is take this code, so you could take all of this, and then you could port it over to the code you're actually working on. So then you'd take this over to your editor, paste it into, say, the CSS file, and then it would be in here permanently instead of just temporarily. So that is another thing, just to keep reminding you that this does not apply to your real life code. This is more like a staging area where you can play around with things. But the nice thing is, when you play around with them, you're not going to screw anything up. You can come to the DevCamp site like I'm doing right now, play around with it as much as you want, and it's not going to affect the user experience for anybody else. Gonna come here and let's take a look at some other items we can see. So I'm going to click on these little arrows, and this shows all of the different items that I have access to. So I could click on this aside, I could click on this vertical center, or I could click on the H1 and see how it narrows it down and focuses it on the page. Now, a cool thing about this is, I'm not sure if you've ever seen something like this, where if I right click on this, notice how it won't let me save the image anywhere. And this is really helpful if you need to go and pull an image off of a website. Notice how there's nothing here that says, save this image. But what you can do, if I click on this and come down here, look, here is the actual link to the image. So it's in the background, and if I click on this, I can copy this, bring it up here, and get rid of the excess information and only grab the URL. And look at that, I have access to the source image. So this is a really cool feature if you're ever analyzing a website and you want to pull an image off of it. A lot of times those details are saved inside of the CSS and not the HTML. Moving our way down the page just a little bit, you can see all of the different items associated with it. Each one of these you can come and select, and you can play around with it. So say that you wanted to come here and you wanted to play with the offset. This centers it on the page, but what if you wanted to not have it centered? So margin left, if I get rid of that, you can see that it changes it slightly. If I click on it again, it puts it back into place. I also could edit the margin right here and say, what would this look like if I wanted it to, for some reason, instead of being 8%, what if I wanted it to be 75% and stuck all the way over on the right hand side? And the real key here is to know that this gives you the ability to play around with code and then be able to then take it and put it inside of your own code on a real-time kind of basis. Instead of an old way of doing it would be you work on your CSS and your HTML code, then you go and you try to open up in the browser, see how it works, and if it doesn't, then you have to keep switching back and forth. This is a way where you can dive right in the code, make your changes, figure out what you want, see it all there at the same time, and then you can put it inside. I definitely recommend for you to explore all the other things as to offer too. Computed gives you access to see all of the div elements in a graphical format right here. So you can see your position, the border, padding, you can see where all those items are located. So this is really helpful when you're debugging. Event listeners, you don't really have to worry about this too much. This has to do with JavaScript calls, and once you get into some front-end design with some JavaScript, then this will be helpful, but for right now you don't have to worry about it. DOM breakpoints, we don't have any of that. That's used for debugging. And for properties, this simply lists all of the properties associated with what we're looking at. Now this is getting very detailed. I rarely have to dig inside of this unless I'm doing some really deep debugging. For the most part, I can live right with the styles because this shows me exactly what I am going to see in my CSS files. Now another thing, and this is what we'll finish off with, is notice that there is a priority with this list, and the priority is from top all the way to bottom. So whatever is listed at the very top is the style that is going to override all of the ones that are on the bottom. So that's very important because if you put, let's go back up to our top spot right here. I'm going to refresh so that we can fix our alignment. But if we come back here, and we've already seen how the paragraph works. So the important thing to note is that if we put, say, a color of green, I'm using that just because it's very easy to see when it changes, but if we were to come here in this parent element and change the color to black, you would see that it changes it for these other items because it's a parent item there, but it doesn't override these elements, and that is because of the way CSS works, and these elements here are the ones that are going to be called, whatever's called at the very end is whatever is going to be shown. So that's very important to know when you're looking at this, is read it from top to bottom, because you may have two conflicting styles that are causing one of the things you're working on not to show up properly. So that is an introduction for how to use the web developer tools inside of a browser.